It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in South Los Angeles, the kind that barely stirred the air. The sun dipped low on the horizon, smearing the sky in golden light, and the streets carried the smell of summer dust and recent rain. Children rode bikes lazily down cracked sidewalks, while an old woman watered her roses from a rusted tin can. It was the kind of day you forget, the kind of day that shouldn't change anything. 9-year-old Kaiden Rivers had just finished his weekly robotics workshop at the local community center. His backpack bounced lightly against his shoulders with every step, and in his left hand he clutched his favorite tablet, a slim silver device his father had given him on his last birthday. In his right hand he carried a small, unevenly taped cardboard model of a bipedal robot. Kaiden didn't walk quickly. He didn't shout or cause a scene. He moved like a boy who had done this 100 times before. Quiet, careful, focused. 2 blocks from his apartment, the world shifted. A black and white patrol cruiser rolled up beside him, slow and deliberate. The engine made a guttural sound as it idled. Kaiden glanced over. The window slid down. Inside sat Officer Grant Malloy, a man whose face looked like it had forgotten how to smile. His sunglasses sat low on his nose, and he scanned Kaiden with a sneer that could scrape paint off a wall. "You lost, kid?" Malloy asked, voice smooth but sharp. Kaiden stopped, confused but polite, just as his Aunt Tia had always taught him. "No, sir," he said, gesturing toward the street ahead. "I live right down there." "You got ID?" the officer snapped, already opening his door. Kaiden blinked. "I'm 9. That wasn't the question. I don't carry ID. I'm just walking home." Malloy stepped out. His boots hit the pavement like a warning shot. His hand rested on his belt, not on the holster, but close enough. "Where's your parent?" he asked. "At home," Kaiden replied, voice smaller now. "My aunt dropped me off at the center this morning." "You got a smart mouth for a little punk," Malloy muttered, stepping forward. "Hands where I can see 'em." Kaiden lifted both hands, the robot model slipping from his fingers and cracking softly on the sidewalk. His eyes widened in alarm. "Please, I didn't do anything. I just came from robotics." "Don't get cute with me." Malloy grabbed his wrist suddenly, twisting it hard behind the boy's back. Kaiden yelped in pain and stumbled forward, almost dropping the tablet. "You think I don't know trouble when I see it?" "I'm not. Please, you're hurting me." The tablet, gripped in Kaiden's other hand, buzzed faintly. Tia had taught him how to use it in emergencies. Press and hold the lower left corner, just once. No unlock code needed. A direct link to her phone. Kaiden pressed it. Just as his knees gave out and Malloy yanked his arm upward, a muffled snap echoed into the air. It was the sound of bone breaking. Kaiden screamed, short, sharp, high-pitched. He dropped to the concrete, tablet clattering beside him. The boy curled forward, his body writhing in instinctive recoil. "That's what happens when you don't listen," Malloy said, not with fury, but with something colder, routine. Kaiden sobbed, the pain tunneling everything into black at the edges. "Please," he whispered again and again, not even sure who he was talking to. "I didn't do anything." Malloy stood over him, breathing hard. His radio buzzed. He didn't answer it. He looked around. No one in sight. Then he looked down at Kaiden and muttered, "You'll think twice next time." With that, he turned, walked back to the cruiser, and drove off, leaving the boy crumpled on the edge of the sidewalk like forgotten trash. But he hadn't realized the boy was still clutching the tablet. The call to Tia Rivers was still active. It had been active since the moment Kaiden pressed the emergency corner. It had recorded everything. And Tia had heard everything. She was already in her car. 15 minutes earlier, Tia Rivers had been mid-push-up in her garage when her phone rang. She rarely got calls during workouts, and even more rarely from Kaiden's tablet. When she saw his name on the screen, she swiped without thinking. At first, she heard only the breeze, then a voice. "You lost, kid?" Then Kaiden's reply, soft, polite, then the shift, the officer's tone, the sound of boots, the shuffle of movement. Then came the scream. And the crack. Tia was out the door before the tablet even hit the ground. She didn't grab her purse, didn't grab her badge, though she still kept her private security credentials active. She grabbed her keys, a windbreaker, and bolted. At Windsor Memorial Hospital, the ER nurses didn't know what to make of the situation. A patrol cruiser had pulled up, dropped off an injured child with no paperwork, no explanation, and driven off. "He said he found him like that," one nurse explained to the head triage. Didn't even give a name, just dumped him. They'd rushed Kaiden inside. X-rays confirmed a clean fracture of the right radius and ulna. Classic break from forced arm twisting. His wrist was swollen, discolored. His left hand, still clenching his tablet, had to be gently pried open. "He won't let go of it," the nurse said. "Good," the doctor muttered. "Maybe it explains why he was crying out your name." Because on the screen, beneath the emergency icon, was a 42-minute call, still ongoing. Recipient, Tia Rivers. Tia blew past the check-in desk when she arrived. Her hair was windblown, shirt damp with sweat, her face a mask of focused rage. "I'm his emergency contact," she snapped. "Kaiden Rivers, 9 years old, broken arm. What room?" The nurse hesitated. "Now." "Room 14. Tia walked in. Kaiden lay on the bed, small and pale. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of her steps, and the pain rushed back into his face. "Tia," he whimpered. "I'm here, baby," she whispered, kneeling by the bed. "I got you. He just grabbed me," Kaiden cried. "I told him who I was. I told him you were my aunt. I told him who Dad was." Tia froze. "You told him who your dad was?" Kaiden nodded. "I said I was Dexter Rivers' son. He laughed. He didn't believe me." Tia's chest went ice cold. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was targeted. She took the tablet from his bedside, tapped into the audio log. She had the entire recording. Every word, every second, every scream, and she was going to use it. In a dim hallway, outside the ER, Tia called a name she hadn't used in a while. "Mary? It's Tia. I need help. A boy just had his arm broken by a cop in South LA. No report, no call-in. I've got audio. You've got reach. Help me find him." "I'm on it," said Sergeant Mary Goodwood from Internal Affairs. 10 minutes later, the report came in. Unit 712A. Officer Grant Malloy, not scheduled for duty, took the vehicle without authorization. "Where is he now?" Tia asked. "Same place he always eats Sunday nights. Benny's Grill, same booth. Send me the location." "Tia," Mary hesitated. "Don't do anything reckless." "I'm not touching him," Tia said. "Not yet." Inside Benny's Grill, Malloy sat in his usual spot, barking at the waitress. He didn't see the woman enter until she stood at his table. "Can I help you?" he muttered, annoyed. Tia said nothing. She pulled out Kaiden's tablet and hit play. Kaiden's voice filled the room. "Please stop. That hurts. I didn't do anything." Then, crack. The diner fell silent. Malloy's face drained. "Where did you? Do you know who that boy is?" she asked. He resisted. "He's Dexter Rivers' son," she replied. "And I'm his aunt." "You threatening me?" "If I was threatening you, you'd already be under the table." She slid a napkin across the surface. On it, Room 14, Windsor Memorial, 9 years old, broken arm, audio, internal affairs, incoming storm. She leaned close. You broke the wrong kid, officer, and now we're going to break your career. Tia turned and walked away. The early evening sky over South Los Angeles burned red and orange, but Tia Rivers wasn't looking up. She was back at her apartment, blinds drawn, lights off, the audio clip from Kaiden's tablet playing on a loop through her laptop speakers. Please stop! That hurts! I didn't do anything! Then the snap. She listened again, and again. Every sound etched deeper into her chest like a scar being recut. The old military instincts had already taken over. She wasn't grieving, not yet. She was processing, strategizing, calculating her next move. By the time most of the city was settling in for the night, Tia had already shared the recording with 3 sources. A former Marine-turned-tech investigator named Rico Vega, a civil rights journalist from the LA Voice named Delilah Cruz, and most importantly, Sergeant Mary Goodwood, who had promised to bring this straight to LAPD Internal Affairs. She didn't sleep. At 6:42 a.m., the video went live. The recording, paired with a simple animated waveform and subtitles, was uploaded anonymously to an online whistleblower platform. Within 2 hours, it had 16,000 shares. By noon, over 150,000. People didn't just listen, they reacted. Parents, teachers, veterans, activists, strangers. It hit differently, because Kaiden's voice wasn't aggressive or angry. It was small, real, unmistakably human. And the moment that snap echoed in the audio, most listeners stopped what they were doing and simply froze. It was a sound you couldn't unhear. Kaiden, meanwhile, was still at Windsor Memorial Hospital, resting but fitful. The doctors had moved him to a quiet room near the end of the pediatric wing. The temporary cast immobilized most of his right arm. His eyes stayed closed most of the time, but his fingers would twitch occasionally, a sign Tia had learned to recognize in him when he was thinking hard or hurting inside. Tia never left his side. The only time she stepped out was to speak with hospital security and insist that no one come near the room without her clearance. No one. By late afternoon, the calls started flooding in. Journalists, civil rights organizations, activists, even 2 local council members. The hashtags had gone viral. #Justice for Kaiden, #Not Another Child, #Protect Black Kids. One news station replayed the audio every 30 minutes. Another aired a blurred photo of Kaiden with the caption, "Who will protect him now?" And when it came out that Kaiden was the son of Dexter Rivers, a well-known martial arts champion and rising action film star, everything exploded. Tia knew it was time. At 7:02 p.m., she returned to Benny's Grill. Malloy wasn't there. She hadn't expected him to be, but she wasn't here for him this time. She walked straight up to the front counter and asked for the manager. "Did you see Officer Grant Malloy here yesterday?" she asked. The manager nodded. "Yeah, he sat in the back. Left around 6. What's this about?" Tia showed her badge. Not a police badge, but her federal private security credential. "Do you have a surveillance system?" He hesitated. "Yes. I need yesterday's footage." "You got a warrant?" She leaned in. "You don't want me to get one, because when I do, I'll be coming back with a reporter from Channel 7. 10 minutes later, she had the video. Clear footage, Malloy, sitting in the booth, laughing, then her, walking up, playing the recording, his face draining color. She uploaded it. It hit 4 million views in less than 6 hours. By the next morning, Wilmington Division was under siege. Dozens of people stood outside holding signs. "Protect kids, not ego." If he's not fired, you're complicit. We heard the tape. Inside the station, things were unraveling. Some officers stayed silent, avoiding eye contact. Others whispered in corners. Malloy hadn't shown up. His personal social media had vanished overnight, and Internal Affairs had just launched a formal investigation. But Tia wasn't waiting on red tape. She made her next move public. Standing outside the hospital, flanked by 2 attorneys and a retired black LAPD sergeant, Tia faced the press. "I am Tia Rivers. I am Kaiden's legal guardian. And I am the woman who heard my nephew scream while a man in uniform shattered his arm." Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled. "What happened wasn't a misunderstanding," she continued. "It wasn't fear, it was violence. And it was targeted." She held up Kaiden's tablet. "This device saved my nephew's life. And now it's going to expose the system that tried to bury the truth." She tapped the screen, and a new page opened, a real-time upload dashboard. Every parent, every witness, every whistleblower now has a place to send their story. The site, kaidenjustice.org live, open, protected. Back inside the hospital, Dexter Rivers finally arrived. He had flown in from Tokyo the night before, leaving behind a film premiere and a slate of interviews. He didn't knock. He walked straight into Kaiden's room, looked at his son, and said nothing. Just reached out. Kaiden opened his eyes, saw his father, and whispered, "He didn't believe me." Dexter knelt beside the bed. His hands trembled. "He will," he said, "and so will every single person who thinks kids like you don't matter." That night, Tia sat with Dexter in the hospital lounge. "He didn't just hurt Kaiden," she said. "He left him." Dexter's jaw clenched. "I want his name dragged through every court in this state." "It won't stop there," she said. "This story is bigger than Kaiden. It's about what keeps happening over and over." Dexter nodded. "Then we fight back. Loud." Tia stared out the window, watching reporters still gathered near the entrance. "We don't need to go loud," she said. "We go smart, strategic, ruthless." She turned to him. "We build something they can't ignore." By sunrise the next day, Kaiden's story was no longer just a news cycle. It was a cultural reckoning. The audio recording, now officially dubbed the Kaiden tape, had been downloaded, re-uploaded, subtitled in multiple languages, and clipped into a dozen documentaries in progress. And it hadn't even been 48 hours. At 6:18 a.m., Tia stood at the kitchen counter of her small 2-bedroom apartment, laptop open, scrolling through media coverage. She hadn't slept. Neither had Dexter, who paced the room like a predator just waiting for the cage door to crack open. A banner across one national news site read, "Officer breaks 9, year-old's arm, audio tape shakes nation." Child screamed, "I didn't do anything," as Bone snapped, caught on call to military aunt. On the adjacent monitor, a live stream replayed an emotional interview with a pediatric ER nurse who had treated Kaiden. "He just kept saying, 'I didn't do anything,' over and over. I've never seen a child in so much pain and still trying to be polite." Tia shut the laptop slowly. "They're listening," she murmured. "Good," Dexter said, "because now we make them act." Across the city, in a sleek, high-rise office in downtown L.A., Sergeant Mary Goodwood stared at her phone. The message from her captain was short. "You know who they are. Proceed cautiously." She ignored it and opened her private line to Tia. "They've placed Grant Malloy on administrative leave," she said, "pending full investigation." Tia almost laughed. "Administrative leave? He shattered a child's arm and abandoned him. I know, but that's the process. Tia's voice dropped to steel. You know what happens when they say pending? They buy time until the public forgets. Mary hesitated. They make sure they don't forget. And Tia did. She held a press conference that afternoon, this time not outside the hospital, but on the steps of the county courthouse. Dexter stood beside her, flanked by their legal team and two black mothers whose own children had been harmed by police in the past 5 years. Tia didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she laid it out plainly. There are more than 300 documented complaints against Officer Grant Malloy. 3 of them involve minors. All of them were dismissed without consequence. He didn't just act, he was enabled. And now, the city wants to delay, downplay, and deflect. We say no more. Not just for Kiden, but for every parent still waiting on a phone call that never came. She tapped the tablet in her hand. This isn't a tool anymore. It's a weapon, and we're not putting it down. The clip of that statement hit 12 million views by nightfall. Dozens of celebrities reposted it. Civil rights attorneys offered their services. 2 former city commissioners stepped forward to say they'd raised concerns about Malloy years ago and had been ignored. And, on Twitter, a single phrase began trending. We heard him scream. We won't be quiet. Inside Wilmington Division, the walls were sweating. Officers refused to answer media questions. Reporters surrounded the building like hawks circling something wounded. The acting precinct captain issued a short statement. We are reviewing the situation with utmost seriousness. But that same afternoon, a whistleblower leaked internal memos that revealed the truth. Officer Malloy had racked up 17 misconduct flags in the last 5 years, none of which were formally investigated. The internet erupted. Tia wasted no time. With Dexter's funding and her contacts in the veteran network, she and their team launched something new. Fist Fighters for Institutional Safety and Truth. It was more than a name. It was a movement, a mobile force of civil rights lawyers, trauma counselors, military veterans, and former police who had seen enough and were ready to act. Their website, kidenjustice.org, now expanded to include a whistleblower upload portal, a complaint map of historic police misconduct, resources for affected families, a national petition demanding Malloy's immediate arrest. In less than 24 hours, it received over 27,000 verified submissions. That same evening, Tia got a phone call from a stranger. The voice was male, calm, soft. I worked under Malloy, he said. 5 years ago. He targeted kids, especially black boys. He called it breaking in the next generation. Tia's blood ran cold. I tried to report him. They demoted me, forced me out. Can you make a sworn statement? There was silence. Then, you get me a lawyer. I'll give you a book. Meanwhile, Dexter was doing his part. He appeared on the Prime Hour, a national talk show with over 10 million nightly viewers. He didn't rant, he didn't cry. He spoke, calm, controlled, lethal in tone. I've broken bones on camera, in training, and in championship rings, but nothing I've seen or done compares to the sound of my son's arm being broken by a man with a badge. Not because he fought, not because he ran, but because he looked like me. The host tried to interrupt. Dexter didn't let her. We're not fighting back out of revenge. We're fighting because next time it might not be an arm. It might be a life. By midnight, a new wave of protests had begun, not just in Los Angeles, Atlanta, Chicago, Baltimore, New Orleans. People gathered with signs featuring Kiden's silhouette, holding his tablet. Tap, speak, rise. It was more than a movement now. It was a trigger, a call, A symbol, but with every movement comes backlash. At 3:33 a.m., Tia's phone buzzed with a silent alert. Her firewall had been breached. Hackers had flooded her inbox with fake threats, deepfake videos, and even an edited version of Kaiden's tape, one that made it seem like he had resisted or fought back. But it was clumsy, poorly done. The truth had already spread too far to be erased. Tia traced the IPs, 3 foreign addresses, one domestic, linked to a consulting firm with contracts inside the LAPD. She sent the data to Mary Goodwood and to 3 major news outlets. At sunrise, Kaiden opened his eyes. He looked out the hospital window at the morning light pouring in. Tia sat beside him. "They're saying I'm brave," he said quietly. "You are." "I didn't want to be." Tia reached over and gently squeezed his hand. "No one wants to be brave. They just become it when the world gives them no choice." Kaiden looked down at his tablet. He'd drawn something, a cartoon version of himself, holding his broken arm up like a trophy. Behind him, a crowd of kids stood cheering. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, "You won't break all of us." Morning was still young when Tia Rivers laced up her running shoes and stepped outside. The sun hadn't risen fully, but the air was already warm. She needed the run, not just for her body, but to clear her head. The last 3 days had been a whirlwind of press conferences, late-night meetings, interviews, death threats, and strategy calls. Fist had grown faster than she anticipated. Too fast. And now she could feel it, the tension tightening like a wire around her throat. The fight wasn't just public now, it was personal, institutional, and dangerous. She didn't get far. At 6:03 a.m., as she jogged down her street, a gray sedan screeched to a halt in front of her. The doors burst open, and 3 men in plain clothes jumped out. One flashed a badge too quickly to identify. Another grabbed her wrist. Hard. "Tia Rivers," the first man said, "you are under temporary detainment for obstruction of justice and aggravated assault on a peace officer." "What?" she snapped, pulling back. "Where's your warrant?" "We have authorization," one of them said. "You can ask your attorney after processing." She didn't get a Miranda warning. She didn't get a phone call. They cuffed her on the sidewalk in full view of her neighbors, shoved her into the back seat, and drove off. Across town, Kaiden stirred in his hospital bed. The nurse had just brought in his breakfast tray when his tablet buzzed with a security ping. Unusual activity, emergency contact offline. He stared at the screen. A quiet dread settled in. Back at the house, Dexter Rivers had just stepped out of the shower when his phone exploded with notifications. One of his old friends, a fellow stuntman turned tech investigator, had sent a grainy video. "Tia got taken," the text read, "outside her building. No badge numbers, no uniforms." Dexter stared at the screen for a long second. Then his expression changed. It wasn't anger, it was focus. At 6:44 a.m., Sergeant Mary Goodwood's phone rang. She saw Dexter's name, answered instantly. "You didn't warn her," Dexter said, voice like stone. "I didn't know," Mary said. "This didn't go through internal affairs. They bypassed the system. This is bad." "I want every name," he said, "every signature, every car involved, every address." "Dexter, you let them take her," he said. "Now you help me get her back." At 7 a.m., Tia sat in a holding cell inside a private detention facility not listed on LAPD records. No one had told her where she was. There was no paperwork, no call log, just a clipboard sitting across the room with a typed statement demanding that she cease all involvement in police misconduct cases. It had no official seal, no legal authority, just a name at the bottom, redacted. She read it once, then ripped it in half. A man watching from behind the glass smiled coldly. "You're making noise the department doesn't want," he said. Tia looked at him like he was furniture. "Then I'll start screaming." At 8:02 a.m., the door opened, and Dexter Rivers walked in. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were two attorneys, a federal agent from the U.S. Department of Civil Rights, and a cameraman. He didn't say a word. He handed the agent a flash drive. Inside, surveillance footage of Tia's abduction dashcam, evidence of her compliance, her private security license and emergency medical credentials, a digital scan of her signed protection order from a previous harassment case, a legal declaration of her role as Kaiden's sole guardian. The agent didn't blink, just said, "She's leaving with us." Tia stood. Her wrists were red from the cuffs, but her spine was straight. Outside the facility, a crowd had already gathered. Protesters, reporters, even a representative from the mayor's office, who tried to act like they had known all along. Tia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Dexter stepped forward, took the mic. "The city of Los Angeles tried to silence the woman who protected my son. They tried to call justice a threat. Now they'll see what happens when you come after a Rivers family member twice." That evening, they hosted a town hall inside a local high school gym. 600 people filled the bleachers, parents, teachers, former officers, students, and dozens of silent victims waiting to speak for the first time. A mother stepped forward. "My son was slammed into a car hood for jaywalking," she said. A teenager held up his phone. "This is my brother's face after a routine stop." A former officer took the mic. "I tried to report my partner's behavior. They demoted me, then pushed me out." Every voice was a fresh wound, finally opened. Tia stood at the center. She didn't promise justice. She promised action. "We're building a record," she said. "A legal case, a data archive, a national reckoning, and, when it's done, every name, every badge, every sealed file, it all comes out." At midnight, their site KaidenJustice.org relaunched with military-grade protection and a new name, FistInitiative.org. The numbers surged, 18,000 submissions in 2 days. Verified, cross-checked, ready. The movement had evolved, no longer reactive, no longer emotional. Now it was a machine. By noon the next day, the chief of Wilmington Police resigned. 3 officers were suspended. The district attorney reopened 10 closed cases linked to Malloy. And upstairs, in a hospital room that now had flowers, teddy bears, and handwritten cards taped to the wall, Kaiden smiled for the first time in days. His cast had been replaced with a removable brace. On his tablet, he scrolled through headlines. "Do you think other kids will be okay now?" he asked softly. Tia knelt beside him and smoothed a curl behind his ear. "They will," she said, "because you were brave enough to speak. And now the world is speaking with you." The courthouse in Los Angeles County Superior Court had seen its share of sensational cases, but on this morning, under gray clouds and a heavy silence, it wasn't just another criminal on trial. It was the system. At exactly 8:30 a.m., a black SUV rolled up to the side entrance. Reporters swarmed the sidewalk. Protesters filled the plaza outside. Cameras clicked, phones recorded. But when Dexter Rivers, Tia Rivers, and Kaiden Rivers stepped out, Kaiden's arms still braced, his shoulders small but upright, the crowd fell silent. There was something sacred about this moment, something more than spectacle. They weren't just witnesses. They were a family seeking reckoning. Inside, the courtroom was packed, not just with press and legal teams, but with teachers, former victims activists. and a handful of quietly watching officers who'd once worked alongside Grant Malloy. At the defendant's table, Malloy sat between two suited attorneys. He looked thinner now, paler. The arrogance that had once filled his presence was gone. His shoulders drooped slightly. His hands trembled when he reached for water. He didn't look at Kiden, not once. The judge entered. Hannah Marsh, known for her no-nonsense courtroom and intolerance for procedural games. She struck her gavel once. The court is now in session for the people of California versus Grant Malloy. The prosecutor, a black woman in her early 40s named Layla Chen, stood tall. "Your Honor," she began, "we intend to prove that Officer Grant Malloy, acting outside of his authorized duty, knowingly assaulted a minor, failed to report the incident, attempted to flee the state, and conspired to suppress the truth. This case is not about resisting arrest. It's not about policy. It's about power without consequence." The first piece of evidence, the Kiden tape. No editing, no commentary, just the raw recording. Kiden's trembling voice. "Please stop. That hurts. I didn't do anything." Then, the crack. The room froze. A juror covered her mouth. One reporter dropped his pen. Even the judge twitched, barely, but noticeably. Kiden looked down. He didn't want to hear it again, but the nation needed to. Next came the hospital photos, x-rays of his broken arm, photos of the bruises along his wrist, doctor's notes, detailing how the injury was consistent with a sharp forced twist, not an accident. Then came the timeline, mapped out second by second using surveillance footage, GPS data from the cruiser, call logs from Kiden's tablet, and the diner's security video showing Tia confronting Malloy. Every piece fit. There was no confusion, no gray area, just cold, deliberate brutality, and silence afterward. Then Tia took the stand. She didn't shake. Her voice was clear, measured. "I didn't punch him because I lost control," she said when asked about confronting Malloy. "I did it because I realized he thought no one would ever hold him accountable. He thought a badge made him untouchable." The defense objected. The judge overruled. Tia went on to describe the moment she heard Kiden scream over the emergency call, how she found him at the hospital, how she discovered that Malloy had been protected despite dozens of prior complaints. She closed with, "He didn't just hurt my nephew. He sent a message to every black child in this country that their safety is negotiable, and we're here to say it's not." The next witnesses included the ER nurse who treated Kiden, a former officer who'd once filed an internal report on Malloy's behavior and was reassigned within a week, and a school principal whose students had been harassed during random stops in Malloy's patrol zone. Each one added a layer of truth. Each one exposed a system more concerned with protecting itself than protecting the public. And then it was Kiden's turn. He walked slowly to the stand, his brace visible beneath his jacket. The courtroom was dead quiet. The bailiff gave him the oath. He nodded. "He asked me for ID," Kiden said, "but I'm 9. I told him that. I told him my name. I told him my aunt's name. I told him my dad's name." And then he laughed. His voice cracked. He grabbed me, my arm twisted. I heard it snap. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, not even the judge. Kiden reached into his lap and pulled out a small drawing. He'd kept it with him the entire trial. It showed a little boy standing in front of a crowd, his arm in a brace. Above his head was a word balloon. "I'm stronger now." He held it up for the jury. There was no court instruction for what happened next, but the gallery stood, not in applause, not in protest, in respect. The defense tried to argue that Malloy feared for his safety, that Kiden had reached into his pocket quickly, that the officer had been under extreme stress. But the jury wasn't listening anymore. They had heard the truth, and the truth had a name. After 8 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. At 4:11 p.m., they returned. The foreperson stood, hands steady, on the count of aggravated assault on a minor, guilty. On the count of abuse of authority, guilty. On the count of attempted evasion of justice, guilty. Malloy didn't speak. He didn't cry. He didn't even flinch when the bailiff cuffed him. He walked out of that courtroom the way he had walked into Codden's life, uninvited. But now, unarmed. Outside the courthouse, thousands had gathered. Tia, Dexter, and Caden stood at the top of the steps, surrounded by attorneys, organizers, and supporters from across the country. Cameras flashed. One reporter shouted, "What happens now?" Dexter turned, expression hard but calm. "Now," he said, "we build something that doesn't need a Rivers to be heard." 3 weeks after the verdict, the world had changed. At least, it felt that way to the thousands of people whose stories had once been buried beneath red tape, sealed files, and silence. What started with Codden Rivers's scream had become something unstoppable. The FIST Initiative, Fighters for Institutional Safety and Truth, now operated offices in 20 states. Each center housed investigators, civil rights attorneys, data analysts, retired law enforcement, and trauma specialists. They weren't just collecting complaints. They were filing lawsuits. They were reopening old cases. They were naming names. And the numbers were staggering. Over 31,000 verified submissions, hundreds of officers under new review, 12 district attorneys pressured to audit backlogged reports. Tia stood in front of their digital war map every morning, her coffee untouched, her eyes scanning color-coded flags. "I thought we'd fight to break one man," she said once, "but we've started tearing down the walls." But the system wasn't surrendering. It was striking back. The first attack came digitally. On a Sunday evening, just before the weekly FIST strategy call, the main servers at fistinitiative.org were hit with a coordinated cyber assault. Massive data floods. Internal sabotage attempts. Pages corrupted. File names scrambled. Sensitive data leaked, including some identities of whistleblowers. Then came the personal attacks. Tia's private number was cloned. Deepfake texts and audio clips made to seem like she was threatening people were distributed to right-wing media sites. Headlines exploded. Dexter Rivers' sister running rogue justice squad. Mother figure or militant? Ex-military aunt pushing dangerous vigilantism. They tried to paint her as unstable, unfit, unhinged, but she didn't flinch. At a press conference, standing before the FIST banner, Codden at her side, she looked into the cameras. "They can crash our servers, they can smear my name, but they'll never erase the thing they fear most, a 9-year-old boy who refused to stay silent." Dexter stepped forward next. He had spoken softly before, but not today. "You want to scare us?" he said. "I've seen fear. I've lived it. I've stood in rings and war zones. Nothing I've ever hit, no fighter, no film set, no nightmare, is uglier than what you're hiding behind those badges. Come at us. Just understand." We hit back. The next attacks were physical. 2 FIST officers, one in Chicago, one in Dallas, received packages with bomb threats. Another opened a letter laced with malware that activated facial recognition backdoors. It was war now, and everyone knew it. One morning, at 5:58 a.m., Tia received an encrypted video. No sender, no subject, just footage, drone footage, Codden's school. A man stood at the fence, face blurred, body still, watching. The video ended at 11 seconds. Tia didn't hesitate. She called Dexter. "They're not coming for us anymore," she said. "They're going for him." Within 48 hours, Kiden had been moved to a protected residence outside Los Angeles. Former Navy SEALs secured the perimeter. Every visitor passed 3 layers of identity checks. Dexter stayed within 10 feet of him at all times. Not as a father. As a wall. That night, Tia sat on the edge of Kiden's temporary bed. He was reading, but she could tell he was scared. "Are they going to hurt us?" he whispered. She brushed his hair back gently. "Not if we make sure the whole world is watching." The next morning, on the steps of the federal courthouse in downtown L.A., Tia and Dexter held an emergency press conference. The air was tense. Cameras from over a dozen networks aimed toward them. Helicopters circled above. Protesters blocked traffic, chanting in unison. Tia stepped forward. "We were warned. We were threatened. They went after my nephew again. So now, we pull back the curtain. And we're not doing it alone." She lifted a flash drive. On here are 49 internal memos, 12 sealed personnel files, over 31,000 verified testimonies, all buried, all protected, until now. Dexter stepped beside her. A portable screen was rolled out. The drone footage played behind them. The crowd gasped. Then the image zoomed. AI enhancement removed the blur. The face became clear. The man near Kiden's school was a retired LAPD sergeant, relocated after multiple abuse complaints. The crowd erupted. That day, the U.S. Department of Justice launched a federal investigation into police suppression efforts across 3 states. But the moment wasn't over yet. Because then, Kiden stepped forward, holding a mic in both hands. The world leaned in. "My name is Kayden Rivers. I'm 10 years old. A man broke my arm and tried to make me feel like I didn't belong. But I do, and so does every kid who's ever been told they don't." He held up another drawing. A kid with a megaphone standing on a pile of broken lies. Underneath, "His voice matters." The crowd rose. Reporters cried. Somewhere, in thousands of homes, kids pointed to the screen and whispered, "That's me." In the days that followed, 4 police chiefs resigned. 8 officers were charged. 3 bills entered Congress to reform juvenile protections during police encounters. But Kiden wasn't watching the news. He was drawn. A new picture. A city where kids weren't afraid. Where silence wasn't survival. Where no one needed a shortcut button just to be heard. And in the corner, he wrote, "This time they listened." If this story moved you, subscribe now. We're building a community that stands for truth, justice, and every unheard voice. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We want to hear from every corner of the world.